get ready to throw down.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I can only live in that world for so long, and I have to come back to it. So
I could be there forever.
I know.
You're living it without that.
On our last episode, we talked about accountability a fair amount, and what we heard from some people was that we also talked a little bit about preparation, right? And preparation is part of accountability. And then some people were asking for a little bit more about that. So today we're talking about preparation, pre-call planning, pre-meeting planning, how you prepare for all the aspects of your role as a salesperson, right? And I'm a big fan of like taking 30 seconds. What?
Nothing. Keep going, man.
What?
I get it.
What are we laughing at?
Of course you're a big fan of your plan.
Of course I'm a big fan of my
C
plan.
is the biggest fan of his plan.
You know-
Whereas me, I'm like, I'm not sure this is going to work, but what do you think about trying this?
Well, we were talking before we turned the mics on and before we started talking about flat earth, but this idea that the more confident you are and the more competent you are in your skill set, the less preparation you have to do, right? Because for me, when I prep too much,
or when you're winning,
Or the more times you've done the prep work.
that's fair,
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're securing what you're doing.
yeah, I agree with that.
What I find is that when I prepare now, and I think about how much preparation I used to do, I find myself making too many assumptions, right? And then I enter into the conversation with this agenda, right? As opposed to just being open of like, hey, like, is there a problem here that I can solve, right? I start getting fixated on certain things that don't always serve me.
Well, and you're serving yourself, not listening to your clients sometimes, right?
sure.
You're following just your game. It's sometimes too much to the T.
Mhm.
And if you're open to, let me see where the conversation goes from the other side.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
I've got plan A, B, and C because I've been down this road a number of times, and I know where the client can go and will go most times.
So, how do you separate yourself, John, when you prepare for a meeting and you walk into a room with let's say a CEO of a Fortune 500 company that makes a lot of money, flies around on private jets? How do you separate yourself from every other salesman that's walked in there, probably saying a lot of the same things because they've all prepped pretty similarly with facts and data? How do you separate that?
So for me, I mean, if you happen to know a Fortune 500 CEO
I'd
that I
be
should
like,
be talking
wow,
to,
how did I
please-
get here?
Yeah, please make an introduction. But
And what I mean by that is somebody so far out of your spectrum of your daily life, right? They
Mhm.
live a completely
for sure.
They think they are at the moon and you're in Illinois.
Well, I think that kind of starts with like the bonding and rapport and how you vision the levels of the dynamic of the relationship, right? Because we talk about equal business stature and being on the same level and things like this, and I think that doesn't necessarily come from preparation, right? Because I think that if you spend too much time preparing and reading on this guy that you're calling on, right, and you see who he is and what he does and everything else, you lead to this uneven relationship, right? They're on this pedestal and you're willingly putting yourself down here. So what I think separates me is my ability to ask questions, hold people accountable, right? Build rapport and build trust, right?
So your preparation is a lot of questions.
Oh man, everything in my first conversation is a question. Literally everything. From my framing to my next steps to everything.
I think I do that. I just don't write it down. I don't prep for it.
Well,
Because I'm going in with the unknown, and we kind of talked about that a little bit, but like I'm going in with the thought that I truly don't know anything.
yeah.
Therefore, I'm forced to ask the questions.
Exactly, right? My worst calls these days are when I spend too much time planning and I make a bunch of assumptions and then I don't cover that ground and it leads to gaps and stalls and objections
So
and
you have
things
to
like
have a
that
second
later on.
plan.
Well, and then I'm just mad at myself for overthinking it, right? Because man, I live right, because we talk about this idea that you can be too much in your head with all of this stuff, sales and martial arts, and being in the military and shooting and everything else. And I love to live in my head, right? Of like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And what I have found is that my conversations are better when I'm forced to ask the question because I can't make an assumption. Like in Office Space, he rolls out that jump to conclusion, Matt.
Mhm.
Like that's me, right? I jump to those conclusions. I make all these assumptions, and I used to not verbalize them, and it would get me in trouble, right? It would lead to gaps in my sales process.
Yeah, I think there's a line there in between what I do and what you do that's probably the more correct line of under preparation and over preparation, right?
It's
Oh, there's a
probably
sweet
covered
spot.
by an eye. That's
Yeah.
probably the sweet spot you guys are looking for. Come on
Probably.
over. I could help you out.
I mean, probably.
Okay, so let's dig into that. So Al, right? If you're gonna go call on
Do you
someone,
even know how to spell preparation?
Probably not.
But let me tell you a story.
It makes him nervous just saying it. You can tell.
Of all
You're
people
like,
to ask.
So let's talk about it as an eye, right? Because I mean, eyes typically love to wing stuff, right? And just kind of show up and just kind of bet on themselves of, I'm charismatic enough, I'm influential enough that you're going to love me and you're going to want to buy from me. So how much prep do you do before you're vetting a surgeon or a frontline guy or, in these different areas you work in?
Probably more than you would think.
Yeah, because I'm not really betting on any.
Is
Honestly.
that because of your personality or because you have bills to pay and you're a business owner?
Both. But I like to have some information, but I don't want to make a judgment call on too much of that information. And I want to be open to, like Clint, being forced to ask questions because of what my client or my prospect is telling me. Now, do I want to qualify? That's where the information gathering helps me qualify. What are they currently using? Who are they working with? Connecting all those dots so that I'm not, and it opens the conversation of, I know you work with or you've done business with, so I can build some common, some rapport through talking shop and industry stuff. Then hone in the specifics of whatever that sales call is about or what I'm trying to ascertain. Does this have any value? Is it worth a conversation?
Okay.
Nan, are you probably along the same lines, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. That's why I say it kind of falls in that between us, right? I figured you guys would be pretty similar on that.
Right.
And it's not a precise science by any means. Yeah. And sometimes it goes really, really well. And sometimes not so well. The guys, and that's, maybe the guy's mood is, this is more of an interruption. Sure. So if I'm just following my script, I don't even pick up on that.
Yeah.
And if you can get to the point where, oh my God, I got to make this brief and figure out how to get back to a better sales conversation. Yeah. I mean, I'm working that while I'm in the room.
Yeah.
So it sounds like your preparation is much more about kind of reminding yourself to like stick and follow a process than it is like preparing for the client individually. Am I hearing you correctly?
Both, but it's to get out of my own way. That's my preparation. I have more don't do this versus do this.
Oh yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I have a lot of that too.
Whatever you do, don't step in this. Stay away from this.
I just want to be relatable, keep it going. I don't want it to be like, done.
Yeah, I mean, to Doc's point, I have that a lot where it's like, the guy says, oh, I was in Montana and, fishing for salmon the other day and I caught one this big. Like I have to don't talk about the salmon that you caught 3 years ago.
Exactly.
Right?
Or don't put your story into that.
Shut up right now.
I'm bad. I really have to say, let them live in their glory. Ow, wow, that's so amazing. Well, how'd you do that? And I'm like, now, if it's trout, right? I can't catch the trout to save my ass, right? I like to trout fish, but I suck at it.
So there's the difference between an I and a D right there, right? He would bring that up to say, man, how do you do it? Because I can't.
Yeah.
Whereas a D would be like, I'm not saying anything because I fucking suck at that, and I'm not going to tell you that.
But doesn't that make it harder to gain rapport?
No, absolutely. The struggle is between how easy it is for an I to go that way,
and it's being people oriented.
Yeah, because we're on that people side, right? And I think that's where I have the biggest struggle with sitting in that and hearing that fishing story, and I want to chime in, and then when I'm bad at whatever they do good, I want to pull myself so far away instead of just saying, I don't know shit about that. Let me hear about it. I don't have that compassion enough to really dig in.
So wait a second. Is it compassion? I caution because I know you're a compassionate guy. Is it compassion or is it just your personality won't give into the fact that that's the inside of you, not the outside? And is it that you just can't admit that you can't do something very well?
Yeah.
Okay, because I wake up knowing there are things I just suck at.
Well, right? And there's also, but there is a little bit of compassion that I want to hear the story. That's compassion.
You do want to hear the story?
No, I'm saying that I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, because I don't either. Right? Yeah. I hate small talking with prospects. Right?
So it takes a little bit of
closed off.
It's cold in here, right?
Oh, okay.
I thought
you were
super hot to being cold. I'm not trying to close myself up.
So, for example, and I'm going to make myself sound really shitty here, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. But when somebody tells me oh, my mom's sick, my instant response is okay.
And
anyway,
yeah,
right. I just go right over that, and and I should, you know,
I think
But
that's
they're
your
telling
age,
you
though,
that for a reason.
no, I
right?
agree. No, I agree.
You're not even their best friend, and they're bringing this in. Something's weighing is where I'm going with that. Wow.
I think
Sorry
that's
to
his
hear about
age,
that.
though.
I'm sure that's going to make this day difficult for you.
I struggle
Or-
with that too.
I think it's y'all. I think you're young. You haven't experienced a lot of
Yeah,
negative,
I mean,
probably.
Oh,
I kind of
You're-
flinch at the young thing because I'm gonna be 40, right?
I
it's
think you
not-
go in there and you say,
or
so,
the loss, because I've probably dealt with it as much or more
Yeah.
than anybody.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then why are you?
I
not
just don't have
empathetic?
because I don't have
Well,
the empathy.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right.
When I'm
Right, I wonder why.
when I'm meeting with a prospect, it's for a very specific reason. Let's see if we can work together. And until I started learning about this stuff, about DISC and everything else, my bonding and rapport was always way too short. Okay, cool. So enough about that. What do you want to
Yeah.
talk about today?
Yikes.
And if they're an I and they need that rapport and they need that little, it's like shunk and the walls are up.
you guys are missing the point. You reach out and you say, so are we thinking burial or cremation for her?
I mean, that's what there's a line in between what I said and what you said that's probably correct. That's why this is so interesting to me.
One of the things that I'm working on is being more okay with like that kind of stuff, right? And part of that for me is like I don't like accepting compliments, right? Because for me, I'm always, well, I could be better, right? You know, and you know, with like
That's so selfish, and I do it too.
no,
But it is
I get
selfish.
I get that it's kind of, you know, if someone gives you a compliment, you should just accept it and say thank you. But it's still a struggle for me, right? And so I recently lost this weight, and some people are like, "Hey, man, you're looking pretty good. You lost some weight." And my default is like, "Well, I'm not where I want to be yet."
Yeah.
When I should just be like, "Thanks."
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Cool. I love
But I
that you
struggle with
noticed.
that, you know? No, it's obviously something I'm working on, right? And then that also leads to like uncomfortable conversations around like, you know, I'm catching up with someone and they're struggling with something and like taking that second to like go find some empathy because I don't have it by default, right? I've either done it and I can help you or I don't know anything about it and I just want to shut up and move on to something that we can talk about. Yeah. And I'm aware of it, which I wasn't for like such a long time. And now that I'm aware of it, I can kind of, you know, this is going to sound terrible, but fake it, right? Because once I can put myself into that mindset, it's a little bit easier for me to like access that stuff. But it's like we have a mission, we have a task. Let's catch up. Let's talk about what's going on. Let's talk about some referrals and some introductions. Like that's
Okay.
how I view my coffees.
So I'm listening to this from Clint and
My name's John.
John.
My name's Al.
Welcome to the show, Nan.
I mean, seriously. Well, because sometimes
Nan just woke up.
Yeah.
He's been in a
But
stupor.
That rosé is hitting pretty hard. boys.
Mama's meds are wearing off.
Hey, but let me tell you.
Mama's happy
No.
Phil.
Hey, but let me tell you, Mama didn't forget my name.
no, truly.
Wow.
Okay, everybody, focus. The reason,
And that means a lot to you.
The reason- okay. The reason for the hesitation was because my brain was like, do I say their name or that he's a D or a C? So my brain was like, okay, what's more
Sure,
important here?
whatever helps you sleep tonight. Us.
No, that's so true.
Hey, you don't have to explain anything to me. I thought you hit it right on the head.
So anyway,
Are we going to say anything
what-
meaningful in this
Yes,
conversation
I
today?
would like
well,
to
let's get
say-
to it.
Preparation's
Oh
the
my
topic,
gosh.
by the way.
Y'all are mean. Okay, so all I wanted to say was, why do you feel like you don't want to hear what that person is saying? Is it because
Because Nan's dying to get in their dish, right?
Because you don't want to share either, or do you want to share and you just can't reciprocate? What is it that causes?
That's a good question.
What's so broken you that you can't?
Why are you so dead inside?
Exactly.
Yeah. How
What
can anyone
No.
stand to be around you?
No, I'm just trying to understand if someone doesn't.
Trust me, we are too.
I know. Well, so what causes that to happen?
We don't have
Look
it.
at him, not us.
Well,
This gene of what you have of pulling that out of people because you really want to know, that's natural for you. We don't have that.
Yeah, right.
We just don't have it.
This is why we're here on this
Sorry-
podcast.
sorry.
That's why
I
I'm
just don't have
asking.
it.
You know, it's
So,
weird.
do you want to tell people about your life and expect them to be
No.
interested? Is all I'm trying to understand.
If you ask, I tell. But
I like
No,
to
it's not.
I like to talk about it. This is a weird dynamic for me, and I don't know how much of this is like C oriented. I like bragging about myself and the things that I've done, but I don't want anybody else to brag on me.
well, I would never get on social media tomorrow and be like, "Oh, my dog died," and then wait for it.
Yeah,
That's not me. It's like, this is my business. This is my dog. It died. That's my problem. I'll
Mhm.
gut that shit, bury it deep, and move the fuck on. That's me.
So then
personally.
you want other people to do the same, correct?
I just think it's naturally inherent that I think that other people would do that. So when I get hit with that, my dog died last week. I'm like, okay. Anyway, so we were talking about, because it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't belong in this conversation that we're
exactly. Yeah. That like that's the thing. We're here for a purpose, right? And back in the day, I would just make an assumption that your purpose was the same as mine, right? I know better than to do that now,
That's
right? Now I do framing and everything
again,
else, setting expectations.
I want to say
podcast.
we are so far off preparation. We should probably get back to that.
Well,
No,
I don't.
Tried
I
to.
don't think
You
so.
guys wanted
Sorry,
to keep
man.
going.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think we're that
this
far off of it. Honestly.
I think this is identifying how you're preparing to go to the meeting, what they're going to say, what you're going to reciprocate.
I got to be prepared for mom's illness and my dog died.
If that's what it takes, you do need to.
But I don't prep for that. They
There's-
give that to me. I even said that
Well,
earlier.
if
I
you're-
feed off of what they say, so then I
Not
go
true,
there.
because if you're a C and
Okay,
you don't expect it and you don't know what you potentially will go, okay, right, great, okay, moving on.
Yeah.
I mean, you could literally do that, right, Clint?
Yeah. That can be very cold.
You could literally lose a cell because of that.
Okay, so you just hit on a good point. You go in, I firmly believe this. I go in really having to pay attention to the facts and figures of the deal, which are going to naturally just resonate with John and maybe Clint here.
Yeah.
But I got the emotional side of this thing wired, right?
Yeah.
Because I can show empathy. I got buckets of empathy that I drag with me.
That's
right?
a good point because we all have to focus on different prep.
But I got to stop
That's
myself and go, and now I'm good with numbers and I do remember them. Did he say 2,500 or was it 250? How often does this cycle run? All those business dynamics I really, really need to focus in on, and how were they delivering those? But mom's illness and the dead dog and the kids and the vacations and the sunsets, man,
I'm lost.
Meaning,
No, I'm in that
you're
conversation. I'm out.
like, do I
I'm
need to explain this?
No, I'm
No,
out.
I'm just
Well-
saying, I think the C and the D need to prepare for that. Maybe
Agreed.
we don't.
Right,
That's
and
all.
that comes down to like knowing who you're talking to. And there's this great tool for LinkedIn. It's called Crystal, right? And it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And so there's a free level of it.
It's perfect in your world.
Right?
He always
It's
has
true.
this.
Well,
You
because-
do have all of the apps.
I mean, it's
Oh, yeah.
bizarre.
Right.
Yeah, which
love-
I
love
like
tools
that
and
you.
tech, right?
I love that you bring that to our,
That's why
our
he's on our
listeners'
team.
attention.
We're
There's
do
a
that, yeah.
there's a Chrome extension. If you're on Chrome, it's called Crystal, and what it does is you can look at someone's LinkedIn profile, and it's going to tell you who they are on disk. Now, the bad thing about it is that
that's
someone
cool.
like me, I put out a lot of content on LinkedIn, right? I post on there somewhat regularly, so because of that, I look like an I,
Yeah.
right? And I think when I ran it on myself recently, it was a little bit more true than what it was, but originally it was just like super high I, and I'm like, no, that's not correct. But here's the deal: I need to know before I walk in the room, more than anything else, where this person sits on the spectrum of the table that we're here at, right? Are they like Al? And I need to like really kind of like ramp up the personality and like let them tell their stories and like let them kind of feel like they're leading the thing, right? Because that's a thing, right? When
Right.
I'm my cold critical self and I'm trying to sit down with an I and they're like, man, why didn't this guy like me? Right? It's really hard to kind of move the conversation forward.
Well,
Yeah.
earlier we were talking about identifying people, and you can ask questions to identify. Clint, you were speaking earlier about. Do you want to share what?
Oh, yeah. What we were talking about is a lot of times like a networking event or something, or when I'm surrounded by a bunch of different people that I don't know, I tend to ask offhanded questions just to see their responses. So, one of the things we were talking about is like, simply put, do you, hey, saw that soccer game the other day. What'd you guys think of it? And you just see people light up or not light up. Oh, F soccer. No, football is a sport. Baseball, I like this. And you just start seeing these personalities really come out. But if you'd ask like, well, what do you guys think of this building project going on downtown? You kind of get the typical front page news answer of this,
Right.
thing. So
I like
that.
I like that idea a lot
Yeah,
of
I
like,
do
of
like that
asking
idea.
kind of
That's
like
really
a
good.
like a left field
Yeah.
question to see how they're really going to
exactly.
respond to it.
And so I mentioned one and it was kind of funny how in depth our conversation got
Mhm.
Pretty quickly.
really quickly.
That's
But I
great.
always ask about what people think of the homeless, right? What do you think about like?
But you gave an example
Yeah.
how you had met somebody
Sure.
and he gave you his story and you
Yeah.
were walking, and then it invoked in me what I would have done in the same situation.
Right.
So he laid out a scenario about a guy that was homeless on a
Yeah.
corner,
Mhm.
and again, there's where your compassion, because you really kind of were compassionate to this guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, but to see the different personalities and the different opinions pop out of it, you'll never get that in a standard
business
prepared.
conversation. Yeah.
You know,
I love
so
that.
so
That makes
sometimes, you know, bringing up off the wall third party, you know, situations
Yeah.
and things that you've been in, and just kind of, you know, throwing a topic out there.
I do that without ever really thinking about it, right? Because like I get really jazzed up about my hobbies, right? Like martial arts and bicycling and stuff. And so then I'm like, hey, what are you doing when you're not working, right? And because it's kind of a left field answer, you're not going to do that. Man, we're super busy, right?
Yeah.
And do this like, you know, presentation of yourself, right? You're going to be real and honest. And because I get so jazzed up about hobbies, right? Whenever someone else is jazzed up, they're gonna, oh yeah, and like this is how I track it. Okay, cool. Like not an eye. Cool.
It's funny you say that because just the other day we had one of our we're trying to land this job with a customer, and the customer said, so, you know, guys, what's your workload right now? You guys, you know, you guys like everybody else, and you guys slammed, and that hurt my feelings because we're not slammed, right? We need the work. That's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to tell them that you're not slammed, like he just said all your competitors, right?
That happens to me all
But was
the
he
time.
baiting you?
No, I think it was just a typical, like that's like a
Just the typical verbiage that goes with it.
it's a, I don't know, a standard letter of like, this is a conversation I have to say in this business setting. So he said that, and I thought about it for a second, and I was like, man, you know, to be honest with you, not really. We're a little slow right now. It's you know, it's getting tough out there. This, you know, what we're dealing in, and to be honest with you, that's why we're here, man. But that threw him off so much, man. It was like, oh shit, well let's get you some work.
Mm-hmm.
So did it work?
Oh yeah,
on your side of the equation or in the conversation?
And I'm not saying that sold it, but that got us going down the right
the
path.
honesty of, hey, yeah, we can use more.
And if I'd have
Ultimately.
answered that like, oh, we're so slammed, because what I found out down the road is that what he was actually asking is that I need a lot of coverage for this job.
Yeah.
And I'm truly asking because if you're really slammed right now, you're going to give me your C squad to come do this job, and I can't have that. But your natural reaction for probably all four of us is to say, dude, we're slammed. We're slammed. Yeah, we're so busy, because you don't want to admit a little bit of failure.
Yeah, seriously, I have surgeons, as just last week, I had a surgeon say that to me. So how many surgeons are you working? Are you just like killing it? Oh my gosh, you know, and my brain, I had to really like go, okay, because my thought was, is he asking because he needs some validity? Or is he asking because he doesn't want me to be too slammed that I don't have time? And so I really had to tweak my response.
It's good that you had that.
So what'd you say?
So I said, well, I've got a decent amount. I'm definitely not slammed. I mean, seriously.
I'm not at my full capacity. I'd like to be, but I'm not.
I think that's a good
And
answer.
he was like, oh, okay, yeah. But I think if you take either extreme, you're screwing yourself, because they don't want you to be slammed.
And so exactly to the point of what we're talking about with preparation, those are the kind of things that I think you should go in prepared to answer.
Exactly.
Like you should run that, whether you write it down or role play with somebody, or on your drive there, sitting in the parking lot, you run that scenario through your head. Yeah. I think that's a really good and important question to answer.
And honestly, I think this is a whole other show subject, and we'll talk about this another time. But you know, how do you handle those kinds of questions, right? The prospect drops a bomb at your feet, right? In the form of, why should I buy from you? Why are you so high?
It's always going to happen.
Well, you know, and like all that stuff. And like, how do you handle that?
Why are you so high? I got loaded in the car before I walked through the door.
How do you turn it around? And we used to get calls all the time, like, hey, do you guys only work in WordPress? And we did. And the first handful of times, I'm like, yep. And they're like, thanks. Click.
And a lot of formal training out there will tell you to say, well, why do you ask?
Absolutely.
It's like, well, you know, answer the question, right?
Condescending.
And then, you know, yeah, it is a little bit.
I think it depends upon the personality, right? Because I think I can deflect an answer with Al a lot easier than I can deflect an answer with you, right? Because you're asking with some intent, right?
Well,
Al's like,
Al's the simpleton, man. He's the village idiot, right?
That's why I always say,
there's a water fountain. Oh, great.
Simply answer the question and then ask why.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But don't ever ask the open-ended question, because you're just going to ask question to question to question to question. Nobody's ever going to get anything out of this. So you got to be careful about that formal book training of,
and give your prospect some credit for the fact that he may just think you're an idiot if you keep with the question. You're like, wait a second, I see this coming. You're not my first salesman. Yes. Shut up.
Right? And answer the question. I run into that a lot. With
like, nobody's ever seen this maneuver. I'm gonna put it on him. Oh, stop your fucking wagon.
I've had guys say like, you're running. I don't know how they said it, but like, you're running a game on me, basically. And I'm like, no, I'm really trying to just dig to see this, right? I am running a game on you, because I'm trying to admitting it. Yeah, I'm trying to get to this solution, right? And I don't truly think that I can be a part of this solution without knowing these things.
Yeah.
That's why I say you answer those questions. But back to our topic of preparation, like you got to be ready to.
You got to, if you're saying it for the first time in front of a prospect, you're not prepared.
Yeah, even if you just run it through your head, right? I mean, that's preparation.
I'll drive around with my daughter, and we're listening to like something like Taylor Swift or something like that because she's at that age where she wants to control the radio from the back.
What's wrong with Taylor Swift?
Nothing.
I'm just not a huge fan. Left to my own devices, I'm going to
I
listen
already
to some
knew
other
that.
music.
Thank you. But go ahead.
I'll turn down the music and I'll do like a verbal like role play with just myself of like a frame or like asking for a next step or like asking like some questions and stuff like this. And she
your
knows
daughter
it by now.
likes that better than Taylor Swift?
No, she doesn't like it, but she understands that it's important to me, right? You know, she's like, "Hey, Dad, are you practicing?" Yeah. Okay, cool. You know,
can you do that somewhere else?
We're not quite there yet. She's only 8, not 12.
Yeah, she's the only kid I know that. She's the only kid I know that would tell Dad, "Hey, Dad, headphones, please." Earmuffs. I got to listen to Taylor Swift.
So back to preparation. You know, I think it's much more when I'm preparing now. It's much more of trying to figure out where they are on disc than I am trying to uncover like company size or potential needs because I want to talk about that stuff in the moment so that way my authenticity of like really being curious and really wanting to understand
and you know how to frame your conversation if you know who your audience is, right?
Absolutely.
If it's an I, you're going to have to let it run a little bit. If it's a D, which most of it will be if you're talking to decision makers, I just say that statistically speaking, then or an S, right? And sometimes it's a C, right? Because you got to go see the CFO or you got to see the process guy, right? And
materials management. Right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Break it off in my rear end. Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, I got 10 of these on the shelf. Well, you're about to have 11. If I have anything to say about it.
I love that mentality,
Let me see that
though.
shelf. Let me see that shelf. I think I can squeeze this in there.
Is 10 too much?
Who's
there you go.
Who's number 9?
We can throw this one away. Oh, man. Yeah.
Oh, man. That's so funny. So Nanette's been pretty quiet, right, on this episode, as she is on most episodes. But I'm curious, right, because you're in this world and you have to go call on these offices and you got multiple dynamics, right? Because you've got the surgeon who you're trying to ultimately get to, you've got a gatekeeper who's there at the front, you got the scheduler who's also part of that mix, and then what's really interesting in that world is like you can get that doctor to say yes, and you're not even halfway there. Right?
Doesn't mean anything.
Yeah,
because you're on the schedule.
You then
scheduler.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The doctor can tell you anything they want. Right. So it's almost like they're not even the real decision maker. Almost. Right. Like the scheduler, and then you got to go to the hospital, and you got to get the hospital to like be okay with it in your pricing and everything else like that.
If you're not already in there, sure.
God.
Oh yeah.
Man, I'm
Multiple
so
steps.
glad.
You're not.
I'm
You're
not.
just
I'm so glad I'm not in that world anymore.
It's not so bad. It's just but that speaks to it's the repetition of what your win looks like, and then and it's never the same or not often the same, and it's very seldom, in my opinion, a perfect pitch or perfect sales process. But you work out all the kinks because it's a different person, it's a different doctor, it's a different hospital, similar but very but has its own nuances. So you can keep that in the back of your mind. Yeah.
You can't take it as like a personal failure every time you get a no or every time you run into a brick wall or
doesn't work,
right? Because like I've been wrong, right? I'll peg someone as like a C or a D because like their initial conversation with me is very short, and then once I get them kind of like somewhat emotional about the topic we're talking about and like trying to uncover some pain, and then I'm like, oh damn, you're not a C or a D. I was way wrong, and then I got to adjust in the moment, and that's important.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of our preparation comes from after action reports of a bad situation.
I was about to say, using that as a learning and a teaching tool.
When you walk out of a doctor in your world of surgeons conference room and you walk out and you didn't get it, that's prep time. In my mind, it's more effective in my world to prep then and there for the next
know what
one
you need now.
before it is pulling into the parking lot.
Yeah, because
I'm sure you guys do.
Because I'm always about the phone call afterwards. I'm like, call me after you've done that meeting, or I like to pick up the phone and have a conversation with anybody about what my sales call either was or wasn't.
Yeah.
Put it in your CRM.
It's not like
weird.
Yeah, weird, huh? But as a D, I don't necessarily prepare going into a meeting as much as I prepare after a meeting
So
for the next one.
Okay. So
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
So
To
let
me,
me,
it's like it's not an onion. It's not peeling an onion. It's walking because it's done. When you take that lever, you're done. It is like walking upstairs because you can go back one and then you can go up again. You literally can't feel defeated if you get a negative. You just go, okay, well, that didn't work. Let me tweak it. I think that's what we do a lot, and it works. It does.
I agree. Yeah. In order to take the next step forward, I think that you have to look back on
And be
all
okay
that
with
stuff.
And you got to make it a habit. Your game has
Habit
to.
is so important.
It's going to have a lot of variables in between each one of those steps, but all those steps count. Particularly, like you said, the wind down, the after,
Yep.
decompression of
I have a
how to
whole
go.
I have a whole business software idea that I want to build eventually for this like kind of exact topic, because one of the things that I do, right, and Clint just spoke to this, is I break down what went bad, right? But the other side of that, and the thing that you need to do is is celebrate what you did well,
Mhm.
right? Because if you don't stop and think like, man, framing for me is really, really hard. Setting expectations is really hard, but I did it in the last 5 calls. Like celebrate that win, because
that goes back to your martial arts training, right? It's like, okay, I didn't do that totally correct, but yesterday I did even worse, and today I'm a little bit better.
yeah, find the improvement, right?
Yeah,
Celebrate the improvements, because
the
you're not
narrative.
going to be perfect.
I don't tend to do that really
I
well.
don't either.
I dote on the
Yeah.
negative, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right?
And I don't see the little wins.
But
that
we're
I
looking
have.
for the problem. So
But
that's
but sometimes we've built enough muscle memory into what we do
Yeah.
that it just naturally flows, and so we're not even picking up on it. It's just, and that's a good feeling.
Well, to me, that's why I journal, right? Because man, variance is the thing, right? You can be 95% to win a deal and lose, and lose, and lose, and lose, and the long run is longer than anyone thinks it is, right?
Mhm.
So if you lose 95% deals, right, or 75% or whatever your percentage is at a certain time, and you lose all that deals, it's super easy to spiral and be like, man, what the hell am I doing? Like, let's just scrap it all and start over. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you did anything bad.
Right. If that's your sales process, and how many, you got to kiss this many frogs to get to the prince.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just the way it is. It's just, that's your industry. Get it done.
Successful people, I heard someone say this once and I really like it. Successful people don't start to get not successful because the things that they were doing don't work. It's because you try to start outthinking that process and trying to like over tweak and over
Yeah. Oh man, all inventions
or shortcut.
I mean, I loved what Doc said earlier about it's more about the don'ts than the do's. For me, it's definitely that. And even, I have a super eye on my team, and I mean highest corner I've ever met. And when he gets in those business conversations, he turns into not him, right? It's a different pitch in his voice. It's a monotone recorded. I've already prepped this. This is how business is done. So I have to be on this level. And it's like, man, if you'd have just been you, because you're awesome human
so
being.
you want him to be more
I want him,
of the eye in
that's
those
what I say. I
moments.
want him to do less, right?
That's crazy.
Where he gets into that monotone, like, okay, I have to ask these questions, and
Mhm.
and then it's so not natural for him when he gets a response. He doesn't know how to react to it.
And-
Whereas in life, if I said that question to him just off a job, he would just have an answer because he's an eye, right? And they're really good at that. So sometimes it's scaling it back a little bit.
I think that the bigger differentiation between who you are around your friends and your family and who you are around like your clients and your prospects, the more imposter syndrome you're gonna.
I was gonna say, I think I'm the same person.
Yeah, I
try to strive for that.
I think I am now, right? I ask a ton of questions, right? I'm open to being vulnerable. I'm open to being wrong better than I used to be.
So mine's went the other way. Who I was in business is who I'm starting to become in my family affairs, of the asking the questions and being a little more compassionate
that's really
on
interesting.
things.
Yeah.
So it was always the opposite before, whereas, I would hammer my family into doing anything wrong, and like, we're going to lay this out. And then I would, that super high corner D, and then I would go into business and I would kind of get in that monotone, and I'd be like, well, okay, we're trying to win this deal and it means a lot, so I'm going to be this person.
Yeah.
And so now I've switched a little bit, right? Bringing that
That's really
compassion
interesting.
backwards.
Because I'm not as curious in questioning when it comes to like my family. I mean, I do better now, right? Especially with like, my daughter or my girlfriend, like she's like stressed out about something. I'm like, do you want me to help you, or do you just want me to listen?
What about your wife? No, the way you dropped
Dude,
that.
don't get me in trouble.
Well, the way you said that,
Jesus.
people are going, now, is the girlfriend just a known entity, or does he have a wife?
Melissa, I love you, right? Don't listen to Al.
Melissa, you are the best woman for this guy
16
over here.
Love you, Melissa.
16 years.
Truly.
Yeah.
Jesus. You're the best. I love you.
Yeah, there's
Please.
something to be said about that.
Please don't edit this out when you're transcribing this
He's
whole
like,
episode.
damn it.
But I think I do better about that stuff now. But I think that's really interesting because when I kind of equate it to like, when you're a kid and you put on like your dad's like suit jacket and it doesn't fit, and it's weird. And that's how I felt without really realizing it for like so many years. And I can remember I was just starting to learn this stuff and really starting to work on the sales stuff and the personality things and everything else. I was working with a coach, and I'm with my buddy in a car, this guy Matt, who I've talked about, who would make a great salesperson. I'm trying to talk him into it, and I can't not be the traditional salesperson because I'm just so excited. I'm like, man, you got to do this. You got to do this. It's gonna be awesome. You're gonna make so much money. Blah blah blah. Everything else. And he was like, well, why? And I decided that I'm gonna employ this like sales technique of like spinning this question back around on him, but I didn't really own it, and it was weird. And I'm like, well, that's a good question. Why do you ask? Yeah. And he was like, dude, is that what you're doing? Is that is that winning?
Is this
selling? I thought
That's
it was
terrible.
But now like my goal is, if you hear me talking to my family or talking to a friend or talking to a prospect, you shouldn't really see a difference, right? Like that's my goal now. And when I do that well, I feel okay.
You
and
will
when
be more successful. I totally believe.
You touched on something, and I think it's really important because you see some of these celebrities, and if you've been in areas, either service industry, and you see them on TV, and then you get to see them up personal in a hotel or a restaurant or something like that, and they're not what they portray themselves to be.
Oh, yeah.
It is such a letdown. And if you're really doing business with people, like we sometimes have known our clients for 10 years or more, sometimes even longer than that. And if you're not genuinely in the business mode and genuinely yourself, meaning all the time or as much of the time, that's going to slip out. Yeah. And that can hurt you in the long run.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or your image or your,
the last call I had with a surgeon, I was telling Al, the surgeon said, it was just last week, and he said, I brought him a new product, and he was just like, I don't know. And he said, I'll tell you the truth. I want to work with you. I've worked with you in the past. I love working with you. I want to do this. And I think that speaks to what you're saying. It's really important to be you, because they can read when you're just
particularly if you're going to be in an industry for a long time and an influencer
and like a relationship style sale.
Or in that industry, you become a known indivital, a player, if you will, right?
And it'll backfire on you eventually.
It can, because
what we call them the biz.
Quotation mark.
So it's funny that we're bringing this up because I just listened to this podcast where this guy was talking about being a special forces operator, pretty high level, and he was talking about that he would be in like undercover situations, and his response to not getting caught or being found out was just not having conversations, because what happens is people trip up themselves in their own lives when you're around them and you ask them the same question over and over. Well, wait, I thought you said this happened there. Yeah. And that's how people get their like cover blown. And like I'm listening to this episode and I was like, that's really interesting. Do I present this persona to people versus like who I actually am, right? And I used to, right? I don't really think I do that anymore.
Yeah, I said we all probably, I say get caught, but we all probably, depending on your emotion of when you're having the conversation at that very moment and what mentality you're in, you say something and then you feel different the next day and you say something, how much you've had to drink. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into that.
True. And there in the longer you're in an industry, the more of your personality that's going to shine out. Like when you're stressed, or you're under the gun, or things don't go right, or things go really well, you're going to show an emotional side to either success or failure. And sometimes people have only seen one dynamic, which is the win, right? Wow, he's such a nice guy. So, but then they haven't seen you yell or get frustrated because the fulfillment stage, you weren't able to get it done.
Well, and I asked, when we were talking about the homeless, talking to a homeless guy at the stoplight, right? I asked Doc, I said, what if you're having a bad day? Do you feel so giving and caring? He's like, no, that guy's having a bad day. If I'm having a bad day and he knocks on my window, he's having a bad day. If I'm having a good day, he's having a good day. But think about that to the people you're trying to sell to. If you're having a bad day,
well, I think professionalism says, look, this isn't about me. This is about...
That is huge.
You got to pull that shit out. And that's not easy for... Yeah, but that's not easy for a lot of us to do.
Yeah. But you've got to.
I'm just saying.
You have to go in there with positive.
Well,
you cannot...
I think that's really easy for you to say.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
That's not for me.
Yeah.
But
if I'm having a shitty day and I've been screwed on 3 deals and I'm going into the 4th,
You should probably cancel the 4th and just go sleep
Agreed.
and get up.
That's a good idea.
But that's
Is it
hard,
ever going to
though, right?
vote? But it doesn't matter.
Because
Is
you're
it
so
ever-
hungry because you failed at the 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
The worst
that's
thing
bad.
for me, is I sit down. I want to, you guys know I love to eat. I'm kind of a foodie, and I sit down and I'm like, I'm
we can tell.
good at this restaurant. And the waitress or the waiter comes up, the server comes up, and they're like, "How are you?" And
Oh,
I go,
that's so
"Good.
true.
How are you?" "I'm just okay." I'm like, "Wait a second, can I get at a different table?"
Yeah,
right? Because I didn't come up
Why
here.
are you ruining my day?
Yeah, exactly. You just brought my experience down
So,
a notch
Clint,
Forget I
inadvertently.
asked.
It's the same thing in business. You cannot go in there with, I've had a really bad day. I mean, I literally in the last 2 weeks have had something weighing on me, but not my offices do not know.
All right,
I'm
so
not going to do it.
Let's dig into this because I've been working on this theory, and
Of course you have.
yeah, right. This is a work in progress, but
Right.
What's
I
the
think-
data and facts say, Poindexter?
Well, this is not a data thing, which is why I'm struggling with it so much. I think that part of the reason why people, whenever you meet someone that you look up to, whether it's like an influencer, a mentor, or someone you've been following, or just even a famous person, right? We have put them on such a pedestal that they're perfect that we don't know how to deal with that person because they're unapproachable, right? So I think that being vulnerable leads to being approachable,
Agreed.
and leads to rapport, which leads to trust, which leads to better conversations. So if you are walking around and you're never like allowing yourself to struggle or see anybody struggle, right? And I see a lot of this stuff in like the online influencer marketing world of it's okay to talk about struggle in the past, right? Man, I had the worst day ever, and then I closed some deals, and then I see this crap all the time, but no one wants to admit like a moment of weakness whenever you're actually going through it. And I think that
I'll tell you the difference. There's a huge difference with clients that I with my best client that I've had for a long time, that we've had rapport. They know, they can know crap, but new people, new clients, people you're trying to win, you better be game on and not. I don't think that's the time to bring in the sad story or
So,
whatever it is.
I think I might have just had an epiphany about this. I think that when you need the support from your prospect, then that's bad.
Yeah.
But I think that whenever you are okay just talking about this thing, and then you can move
You're just
on
relating.
with
You're just relating.
it. I think that's the difference, right?
Yeah.
When you need this person to be like, "Oh man, that really sucks, man. I'm super sorry."
That's so bad.
Right.
Really? Yeah, that's
Or-
that's a hand of weakness right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Just
I
stay
think
away
so.
from it.
Yeah.
I will tell you, in going back to the actors and actresses of the world, it's all actors now, right? Isn't that happening?
Yeah, I think so.
All the actors of the world.
That's terrible.
Man, we are in trouble.
I know. That's so
Clint's
silly.
gonna
You got me
Thanks,
saying
Clint.
that.
Red flags are flying off the shelf right now because of that statement.
But
Go ahead.
a while back, I thought about this, and
Back when there were actresses.
back when they were
And
actresses,
stewardesses.
Yep.
Stewardesses, I was gonna say.
Me and my wife were having
Bellboys.
this conversation of like, man, I look at Val Kilmer in Tombstone as Doc Holliday, and that's like the guy I want to be, right? That's that badass dude. But then as a
Pull
person,
up a picture of him now.
but the point of it
God.
is like Val Kilmer is a guy who went to probably an artsy school, who's very a creative mindset,
Yeah.
who's so different from the character that he portrays,
Mhm.
and by kind of pulling that out, it's led me into this being able to have an equal business stature with just about anybody, because it's like he's just a freaking guy that
Yeah,
went to a
That's
college
not him. Yeah.
and he spent some time in this job, and now he's a CEO of a company, and that mentality of just being able to kind of put everybody on the same level of like, you're just a guy, right?
Yeah,
And
and
I
that's
think that's why everyone likes like blooper reels so much, right? Because you
Yeah,
see these
sure.
people
You
and
see
they
the
are
failures.
this persona, and then like you see them break, right?
Yeah.
And like breaking videos are fantastic and stuff because it's like, oh wait, you're not really that guy.
We get this weird notion that this guy at the top of the company that you're sitting in front of trying to sell to is this like straight laced,
Isn't that
I'm
the truth?
perfect all the
It's
time
so
guy.
true.
And I have to do that, and I can't screw up. That's horseshit.
No, yeah.
And here's one of the things that if you get really successful, meaning like you're killing it, man, you're making good money, you're climbing the ladder, you have to remind yourself you're just a guy as well,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Oh,
that's
for
funny
sure.
because so how much preparation do you do on yourself before you go into those meetings versus preparing for the guy that you're supposed to meet?
Well, I think that's kind of to Al's point, like most of his preparation is like, don't do this, don't do this,
Yeah.
don't do this, right? Which is like self preparation
Yeah.
versus like I feel pretty confident that I'm
who
going to
this guy
stick.
is, what I got to
Exactly.
do to this
Yeah.
guy, what I got to sell.
Well, it's a
I forget all
habit,
that
too.
shit.
But on the
Like-
flip side of that, when you go back home, no matter how successful you were on the day's endeavors, you still have to be a dad. You still have to be empathetic to household
Of course,
situations.
right?
And sometimes you can get on in your way and think, well, I was so good today out there. Why aren't you guys recognizing that? Why am I not just, because sometimes you carry that
Yeah.
in to the house. Like,
Positively
well, I
and
know
negatively.
best. And
Whoa.
this, you know,
Whoa.
and your kids don't know
Wow.
that. And your
When I-
wife doesn't know that. They're like, damn it, just give me the guy that like can fix
Yeah.
the sink and wants to put the kids to bed and bathe them and cook.
Yeah.
You know?
When I think about the guy that I was whenever I was working for you, right? And I was working for you, and then I was waiting tables at night, and I had a baby, right, who was in daycare, and that was super expensive, and Melissa was like going to college, and we were trying to figure out like that whole plan.
Sure.
I was under so much pressure, like I would probably want to punch that dude in the face, like because I'm sure that there were moments where he was like an asshole and uncaring about anything other than his own stuff and everything else, and now like. It's hard because I work from home the majority of days. Like I'll go out and have coffees and stuff like that with like networking people, but most of my stuff is done from home, and that makes it even harder because it's not like I can like have the drive. Like Clint talks about his drives and how like that helps him kind of separate, office Clint versus like dad Clint and stuff like that. I have to like cross like a threshold of a doorway and then not there. Or sometimes Alice will come into the room and she's like, hey dad, are you in? Thankfully I've coached her to this point of like, hey. Now she comes in and says, hey, are you busy? And I say, yeah, I need 5 more minutes and then I'll be with you. But she would come in and be like, let me tell you about Harriet Tubman. And I'm like, I can't do this right now, right? Like I'm either on a call or I got to get this to like a client or something else like this. And I think that the closer you work to home, the harder that stuff is, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I've worked from home before, and I can tell you that like I've had my feet kicked up watching TV because I just can, right? And my wife has walked in and been like, what are you doing? Why don't you take the trash out? And I'm like, this is my work day.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you just blow up.
God,
And it's
yeah. Like
you don't get to bother me from 8 to 3:30. And it's like,
Regardless of what I'm doing. 'Cause
Right.
if I was
Yeah.
in my own office, I'd kick my feet up. I'd be
Absolutely.
watching the TV that's
Yeah.
in there.
but
right?
the anger is from guilt of not actually being at work, right?
God, yes,
So-
absolutely, right? Someone said this once.
That's so sad.
The thing that you hate in the person that's not you is the thing that you are struggling with that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's why I think that, going to that point is like the preparation for all this. When you get angry about something, it's probably because you're not winning at it, and
Yeah.
you're probably not like really putting all your effort into it, right? That's when people get really self-defensive about themselves. It's like, hey, just hand me all your stuff so I can enter it in the CRM. Oh, what do you need that shit for? They go off the handle.
Because I don't have
because you don't have any.
Exactly.
You don't have any data.
I'm like,
Because if you had it all,
That's
you just
so
say, oh, no
true.
problem. I'll
Yeah.
send you an email, right?
That's excellent. That's very true.
Yesterday was Friday, right? And so on Fridays I've got a pretty heavy day as far as like working with clients in the morning, and then I go to jiu-jitsu at lunch, and then I got an afternoon full of clients, and someone canceled, and I said, okay, cool. So Melissa comes home from picking up our daughter from school, and I'm playing video games.
Yep.
She's like, oh, busy day, huh?
Yeah,
And I'm like,
exactly.
you heard the 4 hours of calls earlier today, right? I mean, like, I'm
so
not
do you
working
feel
in a
like you
vacuum.
got to justify it? Or I just laugh a little. So can't you
It's-
just rest
it's
in the fact
easier
that
now.
you know better? And
It's-
you're like, sure,
now,
because I can,
right?
right?
Because
2 more hours of this because of your little comment. Thank you very much.
Hey, how was the car that you drove in to pick up the girl? That's
Well-
the shit I would say.
Well, the thing is
And the private school she goes
you,
to.
you want,
right?
you want a horse and buggy? I'll get you one.
once you hit a certain level of success, then sure, right? But like
when you're failing.
4 or 5 years ago, oh yeah, no, I'm just taking a quick break. I've only been here for like 5 minutes.
Well, here's the deal. 4 or 5 years ago, you couldn't justify getting on the downtown.
That's
Now
right.
you can. And so when you're challenged like that, my usual
Absolutely.
response is because I can. Why are you taking a nap?
Yeah.
Because I can.
Everything's a
Because I'm
process.
tired.
Well,
And-
that's huge, right? Because when you're accountability and preparation,
Justification.
And ownership
all
and-
this stuff. When you're winning, you tend to throw that shit to the wayside
Absolutely.
because I don't need to do that shit. I'm winning.
Yeah.
But then that win goes away really quickly, usually.
Yeah.
And quickly can mean a lot of things. It could be in a day in your guys' business, could be a year in mine, right? You start
Mhm.
seeing that downtrend, and it's like, shit, how did I get to the win? Oh, because I did all this work
Yeah.
to get there and I didn't maintain it, right? So sometimes preparation is maintaining, accountability is maintaining.
Sure. Yeah.
It's
And
not always developing something new. It's just staying on that baseline.
to that point, right? Like whenever the prospect drops that big bomb question at your feet of like, why should I work with you, or why do you charge more than these other guys, or whatever that big question is that's supposed to like push you into
Because
like
I don't need to do business with you.
into
If
like
you're
a
winning
subservient
that-
state.
Yeah.
Like I try to think about the most successful person I know, right? Because like when you see this, right? If you meet Michael Jordan someplace, and you don't know who he is by some weird
He sells
anomaly,
underwear, right?
yeah, like what do you do? Just this and that or whatever. He's not going to sit there and validate his accolades and like why you should know who he is, because he has enough confidence that that's not big of a deal.
Care less if you know.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't have that level of confidence when that prospect drops that bomb at your feet, you're going into validation and selling mode. And if you haven't earned that step, then you shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and I would honestly tell you to just get the hell out of that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Figure out the things that you need to do so that way you don't feel that pressure.
Yeah, if that's a fear, if that's something that you're going into the meeting that you fear and you're prepping for, you haven't done enough before the meeting to get to that point.
Well, or you haven't been in that situation enough times.
Maybe.
So chill out. You're going to screw it up a handful of times, but you'll get better every time somebody throws that curveball at you. And here's what you'll get. You'll get the confidence to sit pat for a second and go, interesting that you say that. I'm a little confused. You're able to sit back on your heels and say, I really don't know. I'll have to get back with you. Any of those.
And that goes back to what I think we both agreed on, of like over prepping, right?
Or if you always feel like you got to answer it.
Yeah.
Like just
that's
going
a
into
horrible game to play, particularly in my business.
At this point in my personal career, going into a meeting, I'm so excited about going into a meeting that's just open-ended. I really enjoy it because it's
and
like,
no pressure.
I don't know what we're going to get out of this, but it's going to be fun.
And the thing is, you have the conversational tools to like deal with any kind of like uncomfortability or like ambiguity and stuff like that. And I think that that's where you need to train to that point, because you're not going to figure it out on the moment.
So prime example, next Wednesday, I have a meeting with a client that we bid a job like a couple months ago, right? And it was radio silence, and I just wrote it off, like done. No, we got to fill that void, right? And they called back and they were like, hey, on Wednesday, we need to set up this scope review. And, we really like your number. We really like what you guys said. And let's go through a little, in further depth conversation. And in my mind, I'm like, shit, there's so much pressure on this meeting now. Because they sent us like a bullet point list of things to talk about.
Oh, I would think otherwise. In my book, I'm like, it's a freebie because I didn't have it to begin with.
But the thing is like, if you told me like, hey, Clint, we want you to come over and talk about this job and just, get a little more comfortable with you, I'm good with that statement. That makes sense to me. But a guy like you, John, wrote that email. They went to the CFO and said, how do we get this done? What does this look like? We need to know your financials. We need to know this. And it's a whole bullet point. And I'm like, shit, there's so much to fucking prep for and all this stuff.
Because you've got more than one audience, because it didn't come from that guy. He's called other people and they've made a decision.
This is not the guy that I talked to for the last 3 months. So now there's this pressure to hit this bullet point list perfectly to win this job. Whereas before... Yeah,
because they've gotten other bids. They've been out doing, and now it's catching up. Wow, that's what the 3 months was about, and now we're still in the game.
Absolutely.
Man, we were going to go short on this episode. We have not done so. Let's get into the Throwdown.
Yeah, we tried to suck that one down, didn't we?
Clint, as a D for preparation.
Oh, you probably don't naturally have much use for it, or you think you don't. That's probably the as a high corner D that's unaware that you have to do this stuff. You really do have to prepare to go to the extreme levels of like making it a spreadsheet and putting it on a list and digging shit out of your CRM. That's probably just not going to work for your personality. So I caution you from even really digging into that, because it's just, you're setting yourself up for failure. What you do have is you have a bunch of tools that say, I'm going to go win it. And if you look at the result and the awards that go along with winning this job and what it takes to win it, you'll justify the preparation to what you need to do.
Damn. Okay. Al, TMI?
It's going to go back to what I said earlier. Write down the things you shouldn't be doing and stay away from them. Be cognizant of that. The rest of it flows pretty easily. And understand your strength is that upfront bonding, relationship oriented. And if it's a numbers game, have a good backstop and know that you're going to have to call them in to talk numbers and be ready for that. Have your game plan down and just stay out of the weeds.
Nice. All right. Nanette, for S's?
S's, I think I really have intention with the result as I leave. I don't want to leave with nothing. I want something when I leave. And I don't know if that makes sense to y'all, but I have an intention of, I have plans on, if this doesn't happen, I want this to happen.
Okay.
So I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense to you.
It sounds like you're taking some time to like actually inspect what you expect and
Yes.
figure out. If
I
that's
don't want to walk
reasonable or
away
not.
with
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah.
All right. No, I think that's awesome. For Team C, it's super easy to over prepare, right? You want to be the smartest person in the room. You want to have all the answers, and that's a lot of pressure to take into a conversation. It typically doesn't help you. Remember, when you're speaking to someone else and you're telling them something, you can't learn anything, right? Questions are going to be the way you learn, the way you build rapport, and everything else. You don't have to know everything about the person that you're talking with in their business because that's just impossible. And you're going to have better conversations whenever you can admit that you don't know something about their business. So, much to like Al's point, right? Figure out what is necessary for you to not do. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to be the smartest guy in the room. And for me personally, the thing that I have learned really, really recently is that there are things that are not really work related, but self-care things that allow me to feel better about being unprepared, right? And part of that is jujitsu, right? Because like I'm going to go get crushed in jujitsu, so it's kind of like this humbling moment. So I can live in that mindset when I'm dealing with someone and I have to admit, oh, what do you mean by that? Which makes me really uncomfortable at a base level. So figure out those things, and there might not be necessarily part of your preparation, but just part of like your program, weekly, monthly, or whatever, that allows you to feel okay with not being correct and go enable that, whether it's self-care, whether it's, training or whatever it is. So yeah, that's what I got for C's.
Cool.
Awesome. Fantastic.
This is a pretty great episode. It was not short like we thought it was going to be, but we get fired up.
Got it off.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So if you know someone else in sales who should be listening to this, we kind of think everybody should be, but we're a little bit biased. Share it with them. We're on all social media platforms. Everything is at Sales Throwdown. If you don't know where you are, or if you've taken one of the free assessments but you didn't really think it was deep enough, contact us, assessments@salesthrowdown.com. And if you leave a review, we will read it out loud on the show. We'll give you a shout out. So enjoy the show, everybody. We'll see everybody soon.
Thanks.